I was standing in my garage at 3 in the morning when the power went out, and the only thing separating my basement from 6 inches of floodwater was a sump pump that had just gone silent. Hurricane Elena had been battering Wilmington, North Carolina for the past 8 hours, and the rain showed no signs of stopping. I grabbed my heavy-duty generator from the corner, wheeled it out to the driveway under the covered portion near my side door, and fired it up. The comforting rumble of the engine and the immediate glow of lights in my house told me I had made it just in time. My basement was safe, my refrigerator was running, and I could ride out the rest of this storm without losing everything I owned. The generator was a beautiful piece of equipment. A Generac GP8000E that I had purchased 6 months ago after the last major storm had knocked out power for 3 days. I had done everything right with this machine. I registered it with the city of Wilmington, got the proper permits for outdoor use, and even had the serial number engraved on a metal plate that I attached to the frame in addition to the manufacturer's plate. The city had started a registry program after a wave of generator thefts the previous year, and I figured it was smart to be part of it. The registration cost me $40, but it meant the serial number was in a database downtown at the municipal building, linked directly to my name, address, and proof of purchase. What I did not anticipate was Veronica Garrison. Veronica was the president of our homeowners association, the Magnolia Estates HOA, and she took her position more seriously than a Supreme Court justice takes the Constitution. She was 52 years old, had the kind of haircut that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager," and possessed an uncanny ability to find violations where none existed. She drove a white Lexus SUV with a license plate that read HOA Queen, which should have been my first warning when I moved into this neighborhood 2 years ago. The morning after the hurricane passed, I woke up to find my generator still running smoothly. The power company estimated it would take at least 2 more days to restore electricity to our area. I went outside to refuel the generator, and that is when I noticed Veronica's car parked in front of my house. She was standing on the sidewalk, hands on her hips, staring at my generator with the kind of disgust usually reserved for finding a dead rat in your kitchen. "Excuse me, Xavier," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "We need to talk about this." I walked down my driveway, fuel can in hand. "Talk about what, Veronica?" "This." She pointed at my generator as if it were emitting toxic waste. "This monstrosity, this eyesore, this violation of our community standards." I looked at my generator, then back at her. "It is a generator, Veronica. The power is out. I am running my sump pump so my basement does not flood." "I do not care what you are running," she snapped. "The HOA bylaws clearly state that no mechanical equipment can be visible from the street. This is visible from the street. It is a violation." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Veronica, we are in the middle of a power outage caused by a hurricane. This is an emergency situation. I am sure the HOA has provisions for emergencies." "The bylaws do not mention emergencies as exceptions," she said, pulling out a printed copy of the HOA rules from her oversized purse. "Section 7, Paragraph 3, Subsection B. No homeowner shall place or operate mechanical equipment, including but not limited to generators, compressors, or industrial machinery, in any location visible from public streets or neighboring properties." "That is for permanent installations," I argued. "This is temporary." "Once the power comes back, the generator goes back in my garage." Veronica shook her head. "Violation is a violation. You have until end of business today to remove it, or you will be fined $250 per day until compliance is achieved." "The power is not going to be back by end of business today," I said, feeling my patience wearing thin. "The power company said 2 more days minimum." "Not my problem," Veronica replied. She took several photos of my generator with her phone, then got back in her Lexus and drove away. I stood there in my driveway, absolutely baffled. My neighbors across the street, the Hendersons, had their generator running too. So did the Kowalskis 3 houses down. But somehow I was the only one getting harassed about it. I later learned that both the Hendersons and the Kowalskis had their generators in their backyards, technically not visible from the street. My house layout did not give me that option. My backyard was on a slope, and running extension cords all the way back there through the mud and rain would have been dangerous and stupid. I refueled my generator and went back inside. I was not going to turn it off just because Veronica had a stick up her rear end about HOA regulations during a natural disaster. I figured once the power came back, this would all blow over, and maybe I would get a fine I could contest at the next HOA meeting. I was very, very wrong. 2 days later, the power came back on around noon. I shut down my generator, let it cool, and wheeled it back into my garage. I coiled up the heavy-duty extension cord I had been using, a 50-foot, 12-gauge cord that had cost me $85, and hung it on the wall next to the generator. Everything was put away, neat and tidy. Crisis averted, no harm done. That evening, I went out to my garage to grab some tools. I was planning to do some repairs on my fence that had been damaged in the storm. That is when I noticed something was off. My extension cord was gone. The 50-foot cord that I had hung on the wall just a few hours ago had vanished. At first, I thought maybe I had put it somewhere else and forgotten, but no. The hook where it had been hanging was empty, and there were no other cords of that size anywhere in my garage. I checked my house, thinking maybe I had brought it inside for some reason. Nothing. I checked my backyard, my shed, even my car. The cord was just gone. Then I noticed something else. My garage side door, the one that led to the driveway, was unlocked. I always locked that door. Always. Someone had been in my garage. I immediately called the Wilmington Police Department non-emergency line and reported the theft. An officer arrived about an hour later, a young guy named Officer Brennan, who looked like he had just graduated from the academy. He took my statement, looked around my garage, and wrote everything down in his notepad. "Any idea who might have taken it?" he asked. "Not really," I said. "But I have had some issues with my HOA president lately. She was pretty upset about me running my generator during the power outage." Officer Brennan raised an eyebrow. "You think your HOA president stole your extension cord?" When he said it out loud, it did sound ridiculous. "I do not know. Maybe. It just seems weird that it disappeared right after she was giving me grief about the generator." "Does she have access to your garage?" "No," I admitted. "But the door was unlocked. I must have forgotten to lock it after I put the generator away." Officer Brennan nodded. "Well, without evidence, there is not much we can do about a stolen extension cord. It is technically theft, but for an $85 item, it is pretty low priority. If you find out who took it or get any evidence, give us a call." He left, and I was stuck feeling frustrated and violated. Someone had come into my garage and taken my property. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that Veronica was involved. It was too much of a coincidence. The next day, I received a certified letter from the HOA. Inside was a formal violation notice and a fine of $500 for failure to comply with HOA bylaws regarding visible mechanical equipment. The letter stated that I had operated my generator in violation of the rules for 2 days, resulting in the fine. It also included a stern warning that future violations would result in increased fines and potential legal action. I was livid. I immediately drafted a response letter, explaining that I had been operating the generator during an emergency, that it was a temporary situation, and that I felt the fine was excessive and unjustified. I requested a hearing with the HOA board to contest the fine. I mailed it that same day. A week went by, and I received a response scheduling a hearing for the following Tuesday at 7 in the evening at the community clubhouse. I marked it on my calendar and started preparing my case. I printed out copies of the power company's outage notifications, photos of the storm damage in the neighborhood, and documentation showing that my sump pump required power to prevent flooding. I was ready to fight this ridiculous fine. The Tuesday of the hearing arrived, and I showed up at the clubhouse at 6:45. The building was a small but nice facility with a meeting room, a kitchen, and a recreation area. The HOA board consisted of 5 members, Veronica as president, a guy named Tom who was vice president, a woman named Linda who was secretary, and 2 other members whose names I could never remember. They were all sitting at a long table at the front of the room when I walked in. "Xavier," Veronica said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Thank you for joining us. Please have a seat." I sat down in one of the folding chairs facing the board. There were no other homeowners present. It was just me against the 5 of them. "We are here to discuss your violation of HOA bylaws regarding the operation of a generator," Veronica began. "Do you wish to contest the fine?" "Yes, I do," I said firmly. "I was operating my generator during a hurricane-related power outage to prevent my basement from flooding. It was an emergency situation. The bylaws should not apply during emergencies." Tom, the vice president, leaned forward. "The bylaws do not make exceptions for emergencies. The rules are the rules." "That is absurd," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "You are telling me that I am supposed to let my basement flood and cause thousands of dollars in damage just to comply with an aesthetic rule about visible equipment?" Linda, the secretary, chimed in. "You could have placed the generator in a location not visible from the street." "My property does not allow for that," I explained. "My backyard is on a slope, and running cords back there during a hurricane would have been dangerous. I did what any reasonable person would do in that situation." Veronica smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Reasonable people follow the rules, Xavier. The fine stands. You have 30 days to pay, or we will place a lien on your property." "This is ridiculous," I said, feeling my anger rising. "And while we are on the subject of theft and violations, someone stole my extension cord from my garage." "You would not happen to know anything about that, would you, Veronica?" The room went silent. Veronica's smile disappeared, replaced by a cold stare. "Are you accusing me of theft?" "I am saying it is a hell of a coincidence that my cord disappeared right after you were in my driveway threatening me with fines." "I have no idea what you are talking about," Veronica said icily. "And I would be very careful about making accusations you cannot prove." "That sounds like slander to me," Tom jumped in. "I think this hearing is over. The fine stands. Meeting adjourned." I left the clubhouse feeling defeated and angry. This was not over, not by a long shot. When I got home, I started doing research on HOA laws in North Carolina. I learned that HOAs did have broad authority, but they also had to follow proper procedures and could not act arbitrarily or in bad faith. I also learned that North Carolina had specific laws about when HOAs could place liens on properties, and that homeowners had rights to dispute fines through the court system if necessary. But the extension cord theft still bothered me. It was personal. Someone had violated my space and taken my property. I decided to do some investigating of my own. The next Saturday, I was working in my front yard when I saw Veronica's Lexus pull into her driveway 4 houses down. I watched as she got out and walked around to her garage. The door was open, and I could see inside. My heart started pounding when I spotted a coiled orange extension cord hanging on her garage wall. My extension cord was orange. A 50-foot, heavy-duty, 12-gauge cord, not the most common thing to have lying around. I walked down the street, trying to look casual. As I got closer to Veronica's house, I called out to her. "Hey, Veronica, got a second?" She turned around, her expression immediately suspicious. "What do you want, Xavier?" "I was just wondering," I said, gesturing toward her garage. "That is a nice extension cord you have there. Where did you get it?" Veronica glanced back at the cord, then at me. "I've owned that cord for years. Why?" "It just looks exactly like the one that was stolen from my garage last week," I said. "Same color, same gauge, same length." "Lots of people have orange extension cords," Veronica said dismissively. "Yours was not special." "Actually, mine was special," I said, my voice steady. "It had a small piece of blue tape on one of the ends with my initials on it. You know, just in case someone decided to steal it." I was bluffing. I had never put tape on my cord, but I wanted to see how she would react. Veronica's face went pale for just a second before she recovered. "I do not know what game you are playing, but I do not have your cord. Now get off my property before I call the police." "Go ahead," I said. "Call them. I would love to have them come take a look at that cord." Veronica stared at me for a long moment, then turned and went into her house, slamming the door behind her. I walked back to my house, my mind racing. I had not actually seen any tape on the cord from where I was standing, but her reaction told me everything I needed to know. That was my cord. I needed proof. That evening I called my neighbor, a guy named Marcus who lived next door to me. Marcus was a tech guy, worked in IT, and had security cameras all over his house. "Marcus, this is going to sound weird, but do your cameras cover my driveway at all?" "Yeah, actually," Marcus said. "My side camera picks up part of your driveway and your garage door." "Why?" "Someone stole my extension cord from my garage last week. I think it was Veronica Garrison. Is there any chance your cameras caught anything?" Marcus was silent for a moment. "You think the HOA president stole your extension cord? That is wild. Let me check the footage. What day did it happen?" I gave him the date and approximate time. Marcus said he would review the footage and get back to me. 2 hours later, he called me back. "Dude, you are not going to believe this," Marcus said, his voice excited. "I've got her on camera, clear as day." She pulled up in her Lexus, got out, looked around like she was checking if anyone was watching, then went into your garage through the side door. She came out about 2 minutes later carrying your orange extension cord, put it in her trunk, and drove off. "Are you serious?" I could barely contain my excitement. "Dead serious. I am sending you the video file right now. This is insane." I received the video file and watched it 3 times. Marcus was right. The footage showed Veronica committing theft, plain and simple. She had deliberately entered my property without permission and stolen my extension cord. This was not just some petty HOA dispute anymore. This was a crime. The next morning, I went to the Wilmington Police Department with the video file on a USB drive. I asked to speak with Officer Brennan, the same officer who had taken my initial report. He watched the video, watched it again, and then sat back in his chair. "Well, that is pretty clear evidence of theft," he said. "I will need to speak with my supervisor, but we should be able to press charges based on this." "There is something else," I said. "The extension cord was connected to my generator, and the generator is registered with the city. The serial number is in a database downtown. If she took the cord, I am wondering if she might have had plans for the generator too. Officer Brennan nodded. That is a good point. Let me make some calls. He left the room for about 10 minutes, then came back with an older officer who introduced himself as Detective Raymond Kowalski. Mr. Alvarez, Detective Kowalski said, shaking my hand. I understand you have some evidence of theft involving your HOA president. Yes, sir, I said, and I walked him through everything. The generator, the HOA violation, the fine, the stolen extension cord, and the video evidence. Detective Kowalski watched the video carefully. This is good evidence, but I am curious about something. You mentioned your generator is registered with the city. Do you have the registration paperwork? Yes, at home. I can bring it in. Please do. I want to see if we can tie this together into something bigger. If she is stealing from you, she might be stealing from other homeowners too. HOA board members sometimes abuse their positions. I went home, grabbed my generator registration paperwork, and brought it back to the police station. The registration showed my name, address, the generator's make and model, the serial number, and the date of registration. Detective Kowalski made copies of everything. Here is what we are going to do, he said. We are going to pay Mrs. Garrison a visit and ask her some questions. We will ask about the extension cord and we will see how she reacts. If she has got nothing to hide, she will cooperate. If she does, well, that tells us something too. That afternoon, I got a call from Detective Kowalski. We spoke with Mrs. Garrison. She denied taking your extension cord. She claims the one in her garage is hers and that she has owned it for years. However, when we asked if we could examine the cord, she refused and said we would need a warrant. So what happens now? I asked. Now we get a warrant. Based on the video evidence you provided, a judge will issue a search warrant for her property. We will execute it tomorrow morning. The next morning, I was drinking coffee in my kitchen when I saw 2 police cars pull up in front of Veronica's house. Detective Kowalski and 3 other officers got out and approached her door. I watched from my window as Veronica answered, clearly agitated. They showed her the warrant, and she had no choice but to let them in. About 30 minutes later, Detective Kowalski called me. We have got your extension cord. She tried to say it was hers, but when we examined it, we found your initials on a piece of blue tape, just like you said. I almost laughed out loud. My bluff had become reality because Veronica had not bothered to check the cord after she stole it. I must have put that tape on there at some point and forgotten about it. We are charging her with theft, Detective Kowalski continued, but here is where it gets interesting. When we were in her garage, we saw something else. She has got a list on her wall. A list of homeowners in your neighborhood with notes next to their names. Things like generator model, security system type, expensive tools in garage. It looks like she has been casing houses. My blood ran cold. You think she has been stealing from other people too? We do not know yet, but we are going to find out. We have asked her to come down to the station for further questioning. In the meantime, you might want to spread the word to your neighbors to check if they are missing anything. I spent the rest of the day calling and texting my neighbors. The responses were shocking. The Hendersons across the street said they had been missing a power drill set that disappeared from their garage a few months ago. The Kowalskis down the street had lost a chainsaw. Another neighbor, a woman named Patricia who lived 2 streets over, said her bicycle had vanished from her shed. Everyone had just assumed it was random theft or that they had misplaced the items. No one suspected Veronica. Over the next week, the investigation expanded. Detective Kowalski obtained another warrant, this time for Veronica's entire property. They found stolen items from at least 7 different homes in the neighborhood. power tools, extension cords, a pressure washer, a leaf blower, and various other items that she had apparently taken during her walks around the neighborhood. As HOA president, she had access to certain areas and had used her position to scope out homes and steal from them. The community was in an uproar. People who had trusted Veronica, who had voted for her as HOA president, felt betrayed and violated. An emergency HOA meeting was called, and Veronica was immediately removed from her position. Tom, the vice president, took over temporarily. But the legal troubles for Veronica were just beginning. She was formally charged with 7 counts of theft, 1 count of burglary for entering my garage without permission, and 1 count of abuse of fiduciary duty for using her HOA position to facilitate the crimes. The prosecutor's office took the case seriously because it involved a breach of trust in a position of authority. I was called as a witness in the preliminary hearings. I testified about the generator incident, the stolen extension cord, and the video evidence. Veronica's lawyer tried to argue that the video was not clear enough to prove identity, but Marcus had a high-definition camera system, and you could clearly see Veronica's face, her distinctive haircut, and even her license plate. During the discovery process, something else came to light. Veronica had been selling some of the stolen items online through various marketplace apps. The police traced several sales back to her through her email and phone records. She had made over $3,000 selling stolen property over the past year. The trial was set for 4 months later. In the meantime, my life slowly returned to normal. The HOA, now under new leadership, officially rescinded my fine and issued a formal apology. Tom, the new acting president, even came to my house personally to apologize for how Veronica had treated me. "We had no idea she was doing any of this," Tom said, looking genuinely distressed. "We thought she was just really passionate about maintaining community standards. We did not realize she was a criminal." "It is not your fault," I said. "She fooled a lot of people." The HOA also updated their bylaws to include exceptions for emergency situations. Generators could now be operated during power outages without fear of violation, as long as they met safety requirements. It was a small victory, but it felt good to know that other homeowners would not have to go through what I went through. As the trial date approached, I received a call from the prosecutor's office. They wanted to make sure I was prepared to testify and to give me an update on the case. "Mrs. Garrison's attorney has approached us about a plea deal," the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Amanda Torres, told me. "She is willing to plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for avoiding a trial." "What kind of reduced charges?" I asked. "We are proposing she pleads guilty to 5 counts of misdemeanor theft and 1 count of criminal trespass. She would face probation, community service, and full restitution to all victims. She would also have to resign from any HOA positions permanently and could not serve in any similar capacity in the future." "What about jail time?" "Probably not, given that these are mostly low-value property crimes and she has no prior record. The judge might give her a suspended sentence." I was not thrilled about the idea of Veronica avoiding jail, but I also understood the practicalities. Trials were expensive and time-consuming, and there was always a risk that something could go wrong. A guaranteed guilty plea and restitution seemed like a reasonable outcome. "What do the other victims think?" I asked. "Most are in favor of the plea deal. They just want their property or compensation back and want this to be over." "Then I am okay with it too," I said. 2 weeks later, Veronica appeared in court and formally entered her guilty plea. I attended the hearing along with several other victims. Veronica stood before the judge, looking nothing like the confident, authoritative HOA president who had once threatened me with fines. She looked small, defeated, and ashamed. The judge accepted the plea deal but made it clear that Veronica's actions were serious and had damaged the trust of an entire community. She was sentenced to 3 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and ordered to pay full restitution to all victims. The total restitution amount came to just over $8,000, which included the value of all stolen items plus damages and fees. For me, that meant I would be reimbursed $85 for my extension cord, plus an additional $50 for my time and trouble. It was not about the money, though. It was about justice and accountability. After the hearing, I spoke briefly with Amanda Torres, the prosecutor. "Thank you for pursuing this case," I said. "I know an extension cord does not seem like a big deal, but it was the principle of the thing." "Actually, the extension cord was a big deal," Amanda said. "It was the key piece of evidence that unraveled everything. If you had not registered your generator with the city, and if you had not followed up on the theft, we might never have caught her. You did the right thing by documenting everything and by getting that video evidence. That made me feel a bit better. Sometimes doing the right thing and following proper procedures actually paid off. Over the following months, things in Magnolia Estates slowly returned to normal. The HOA elected a new board, and they made transparency and accountability their top priorities. They published all bylaws online, created a clear process for disputing fines, and established an anonymous reporting system for concerns about board member conduct. Veronica moved out of the neighborhood about 6 months after her sentencing. I heard through the grapevine that she and her husband were getting divorced and that she had moved in with her sister in Raleigh. I never saw her again. As for me, I kept my generator in good working order, properly registered and ready to go in case of another power outage. I also installed my own security cameras around my property. Marcus had convinced me it was a smart investment, and after everything that had happened, I agreed. The whole experience taught me several valuable lessons. First, always document everything, especially when dealing with organizations like HOAs that have power over your property. Second, trust your instincts. When I suspected Veronica had stolen my extension cord, I could have just let it go and bought a new one. But I followed my gut, investigated, and uncovered a much bigger problem. Third, community matters. My neighbors and I became closer after the whole ordeal. We looked out for each other more, communicated better, and worked together to make our neighborhood safer. But perhaps the most important lesson was about the dangers of unchecked authority. Veronica had been given power as HOA president, and she had abused it spectacularly. She had used her position to harass homeowners, to access their properties, and to steal from them. It was a reminder that any position of authority, no matter how small, requires oversight and accountability. One evening about a year after the whole incident, I was sitting on my front porch with a beer, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. Marcus came over and joined me. "You ever think about how crazy this all was?" he asked, settling into the chair next to me. "All the time," I said. "I mean, who steals an extension cord? Of all things to steal, an extension cord." Marcus laughed. "Yeah, but it was not really about the extension cord, was it? It was about power and control. She was mad that you did not fall in line, so she decided to teach you a lesson." "Well, she learned a lesson instead," I said. "That she did. Hey, did you hear they are putting up a new sign at the entrance to the neighborhood?" "No, what kind of sign?" "One of those fancy electronic ones that displays community messages." The new HOA board thought it would be a good way to communicate with everyone. No more surprise violation notices in the mail. "That is actually a good idea," I said. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying the evening. Life in Magnolia Estates had improved significantly since Veronica's reign of terror had ended. People were friendlier, the HOA was more reasonable, and there was a genuine sense of community that had not existed before. A few weeks later, I received my final check from Veronica's restitution payments. $135, as ordered by the court. I deposited it and decided to use the money to buy an even better extension cord, this time with my name permanently engraved on the plug ends. I also bought a heavy-duty lock for my garage side door. Fool me once and all that. The new HOA board also did something I thought was particularly smart. They created a community watch program, but instead of just watching for crime, it was designed to watch for any abuses by the HOA board itself. A committee of rotating volunteers would attend all board meetings, review all fines and violations, and serve as a check on board authority. It was a simple idea, but it made a huge difference in how the HOA operated. I volunteered for the committee during the second rotation. The meetings were usually pretty boring, mostly discussions about landscaping contracts and pool maintenance schedules. But I felt it was important to participate. After what I had been through, I wanted to make sure no other homeowner would be victimized by someone in a position of trust. During one of the committee meetings, Tom, who was now the properly elected HOA president, brought up an interesting proposal. "We have been thinking about creating a neighborhood registry for high-value items," Tom said, "similar to what Xavier did with his generator. If people voluntarily register their expensive tools, equipment, and electronics with the HOA, we can create a database that could help recover stolen property and deter theft." It was a good idea, and I said so. Several other committee members agreed. We discussed privacy concerns and how to keep the registry secure, but ultimately decided it was worth implementing. Within 3 months, over 60 homeowners had registered items ranging from generators to lawn mowers to expensive bicycles. The registry proved its worth sooner than expected. About 8 months after it was created, someone's riding lawn mower was stolen from their shed. They reported it to the police, who checked the registry database and found the serial number. 2 weeks later, the mower turned up at a pawn shop in Fayetteville. The pawn shop's records led police to the thief, a guy who had been doing landscaping work in the neighborhood and had been stealing from multiple homes. He was arrested and charged, and the homeowner got their mower back. Stories like that made me feel good about what had started as a terrible experience. Something positive had come out of the whole mess with Veronica. The neighborhood was safer, the HOA was more accountable, and people were looking out for each other. I ran into Detective Kowalski at a coffee shop in downtown Wilmington about 18 months after Veronica's sentencing. He was grabbing a coffee before his shift, and we chatted for a few minutes. "You know, your case ended up being pretty significant," he told me. After Veronica was convicted, we started looking more closely at HOA-related crimes. Turns out it is more common than people think. Board members abusing their authority, embezzling HOA funds, using their positions to harass homeowners they do not like. We have opened several investigations since then. Really? I was surprised. Yeah, your case got some media attention and it encouraged other victims to come forward. We have got 2 active cases right now involving HOA board members in other neighborhoods. One of them is accused of embezzling over $30,000 from HOA funds. Wow, I guess Veronica was not as unique as we thought. Not at all. But what you did, following up on the theft and getting evidence, that was key. Most people would have just written off an extension cord as not worth the trouble. You pursued it, and it made a difference. That conversation stuck with me. It was a reminder that standing up for yourself, even in small ways, could have ripple effects you never anticipated. My stolen extension cord had led to a criminal investigation, multiple recoveries of stolen property, improved HOA governance in my neighborhood, and apparently contributed to broader awareness of HOA-related crimes in the area. Life continued on in Magnolia Estates. Seasons changed, neighbors came and went, and the community thrived. I ended up serving on the HOA board myself after being nominated and elected by my neighbors. I was hesitant at first, given my history with the organization, but I realized that was exactly why I should serve. I understood what it felt like to be on the receiving end of arbitrary and unfair HOA actions, and I could help make sure that did not happen to others. During my time on the board, we made several more improvements to the bylaws and procedures. We established clear criteria for what constituted a violation, created an appeals process that was actually fair and accessible, and implemented term limits for board positions so no one person could accumulate too much power for too long. We also made the financials completely transparent, publishing quarterly reports that any homeowner could review. The changes were not always popular with everyone. Some of the old guard homeowners thought we were being too lenient and that standards were slipping. But the vast majority of residents appreciated the more balanced approach. Violation notices went down by over 60%, not because people were violating less, but because we were focusing on actual problems rather than nitpicking every tiny deviation from the rules. One day, about 2 years after Veronica's conviction, I was working in my garage when a car pulled up in my driveway. A man in his early 60s got out and approached me. "Are you Xavier Alvarez?" he asked. "Yes, can I help you?" "My name is Richard Garrison. I was married to Veronica." I tensed up immediately. I had no idea what to expect from this conversation. Richard must have noticed my discomfort because he quickly raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "I am not here to cause trouble. I just wanted to apologize for what my ex-wife did to you and your neighbors." I had no idea she was stealing from people. When the police showed up with that search warrant, I was completely blindsided. "I appreciate that," I said cautiously, "but you did not do anything wrong. You do not need to apologize for her actions." "I know, but I felt like I needed to say it anyway. Veronica and I are divorced now. The whole thing destroyed our marriage. I could not stay with someone who had betrayed the trust of so many people." He paused, looking genuinely distressed. "I thought I knew her." We had been married for 23 years, but I did not know her at all. We talked for about 20 minutes. Richard explained that Veronica had become increasingly obsessed with control and status in the years leading up to the incident. Being HOA president had fed into that obsession, and she had started to believe that the rules did not apply to her because she was the one enforcing them. It was a classic case of power corrupting someone. Richard also told me that Veronica had completed her community service and probation and was trying to rebuild her life in Raleigh. She had gotten a job as a receptionist at a dental office and was going to therapy. He had not spoken to her in months, but he had heard through mutual friends that she was genuinely remorseful about what she had done. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy for Veronica. She had made terrible choices and had paid a heavy price for them. But mostly, I just felt relieved that the whole thing was behind us and that justice had been served. After Richard left, I went inside and found the old news articles about the case. The local newspaper had covered it extensively, with headlines like "HOA president accused of stealing from neighbors" and "Trust betrayed." "Magnolia Estates, HOA scandal unfolds." Reading through them again, I was struck by how much had changed since then. The neighborhood was stronger now. The HOA was more functional and fair. People felt safer and more connected to each other. All because I had refused to just accept the theft of an extension cord and had pursued justice. I walked out to my garage and looked at my generator, still sitting in the corner where I had placed it after the last power outage. The serial number plate was still attached, shiny and clearly visible. That generator, that registration, that serial number in the database downtown. It had all come together in a way I never could have anticipated. Sometimes the smallest acts of responsibility and preparation can have the biggest impacts. Registering my generator with the city had seemed like a minor thing at the time, just a $40 fee and some paperwork. But it had become a crucial piece of evidence that helped bring a criminal to justice and had ultimately improved life for an entire community. I thought about all the people who do not bother with registrations, who skip the paperwork, who figure it is not worth the hassle. I had almost been one of those people, but something had made me take that extra step, and it had made all the difference. As I stood there in my garage, I made a mental note to renew my generator registration when it came due. I also decided to register a few other items I had acquired since then. A new pressure washer, a high-end power drill set, and a really nice set of socket wrenches. It was not paranoia. It was just common sense. If those items were ever stolen, I would have proof of ownership and serial numbers to help recover them. The evening was getting late, and I could hear my phone ringing inside the house. It was Marcus, calling to see if I wanted to come over for a barbecue. Some of the neighbors were gathering to celebrate the end of summer, and they wanted me to join. "I will be right over," I told him. As I walked down the street toward Marcus's house, I looked around at the neighborhood. Kids were riding bikes, people were walking dogs. Neighbors were chatting over fences. It was a normal, peaceful suburban evening. Exactly what it should be, and somewhere in Raleigh, Veronica was living her life, dealing with the consequences of her actions. I did not hate her. I did not even think about her much anymore. She was just a person who had made bad choices and had been held accountable. The system had worked, justice had been served, and life had moved on. The barbecue at Marcus's house was great. About 15 neighbors showed up, and we spent the evening eating burgers, drinking beer, and swapping stories. Someone inevitably brought up the Veronica situation, as always happened when we got together. "Can you believe it has been over 2 years?" Patricia, the woman who had lost her bicycle, said, "It feels like it just happened." "Time flies," I said, "but I am glad it is behind us." "We should thank you, Xavier," Tom said, raising his beer. "You are the one who caught her. If you had not pursued that extension cord theft, who knows how long she would have kept stealing from us." Everyone raised their glasses in a toast, and I felt a wave of gratitude for these people, my neighbors, my community. We had been through something difficult together, and we had come out stronger on the other side. As the evening wound down and people started heading home, I found myself talking with Tom about HOA business. We were planning a neighborhood improvement project, a new playground for the community park, and discussing how to fund it. "You know, Xavier, you have been really good for this board," Tom said. "You bring a perspective that we needed. Someone who understands what it is like to be on the receiving end of unfair treatment." "Thanks, Tom. I just try to be fair and reasonable. That is all any of us can do." "Well, keep it up. We need more people like you involved in community leadership." I walked home that night feeling content. Life was good. The neighborhood was thriving. The HOA was functional, and my generator was sitting safely in my garage, properly registered, ready to go if another storm knocked out the power. As I got ready for bed, I checked the weather forecast on my phone. There was a tropical storm forming off the coast of Florida, projected to possibly head toward the Carolinas in about a week. Hurricane season was ramping up again. I made a mental note to check my generator's fuel levels and to make sure all my extension cords were in good shape. Then I laughed at myself. Of course I would be checking my extension cords. After everything that had happened, I would probably never look at an extension cord the same way again. They had gone from being simple tools to being symbols of justice, accountability, and the importance of standing up for yourself. The tropical storm ended up turning east and missing North Carolina entirely. But I was prepared anyway, just in case. That was the thing about being a homeowner in hurricane country. You always had to be ready. And I was ready with a properly registered generator, a set of heavy-duty extension cords with my name engraved on them, a locked garage and security cameras watching over my property. More importantly, I had a community that looked out for each other and an HOA that actually served the interests of homeowners rather than terrorizing them. It had taken a theft, an investigation, a criminal prosecution, and a lot of hard work to get there, but we had made it. And it had all started with a generator cord and a serial number registered downtown at the Wilmington Municipal Building. Sometimes the smallest things can change everything. You just have to be willing to pay attention, to follow through, and to stand up for what is right, even when it seems like it might not be worth the trouble, because it is always worth the trouble. Justice is always worth pursuing, and communities are always worth fighting for. I fell asleep that night with a smile on my face, grateful for my home, my neighborhood, and the hard lessons I had learned about standing up to petty tyrants who abuse their power. Veronica had tried to intimidate me with fines and had stolen my property out of spite. But in the end, she had lost everything while the community she had tried to control had grown stronger and more united. That was the real ending to the story. Not just that a criminal had been caught and punished, but that a community had come together, had reformed itself, and had created something better than what existed before. That was the legacy of the stolen generator cord and the serial number registered downtown. Not just justice for one theft, but lasting positive change for everyone. And every time I looked at my generator sitting in the garage, I was reminded of that. Every time I saw Veronica's name come up in conversation, which was increasingly rare these days, I was reminded of how important it is to document things, to stand up for yourself, and to never assume that someone in authority is automatically acting in good faith. The world needs more accountability, more transparency, and more people willing to say, this is not right when they see injustice. Even small injustices like an unfair HOA fine or a stolen extension cord. Because those small injustices can be symptoms of bigger problems, and addressing them head-on can prevent much worse things from happening. That was my story. That was how an HOA Karen stole my generator cord and did not know the serial number was registered downtown. And that was how one stolen extension cord led to the downfall of a corrupt HOA president and the reform of an entire neighborhood association. It was not the story I expected to be telling when I moved into Magnolia Estates 2 years earlier. But it was the story I got, and I was proud of how it turned out. Not because I was some hero, I was not. I was just a guy who refused to be pushed around and who followed through when something was not right. But sometimes that is all it takes to make a difference.